Everyone loves to feel superior until they meet a man with nothing left to prove. For 3 months, an arrogant black belt mocked me behind his gym, calling me a bum, kicking my cup of change. He never imagined the homeless man he shoved off a crate had once led a Navy SEAL team through the worst of Kandahar. What happened next took exactly one punch. My name is Marcus Webb. At least, it was the last time anyone cared to ask. For the past 3 months, my address had been a cardboard shelter under the South Street overpass. My only neighbors, the rats in the dumpsters behind Higgins Elite MMA. The gym's back door opened right into my world, and every morning, a 26-year-old black belt named Chad Higgins stepped out to remind me I was less than human. What Chad didn't know, what no one bothered to learn, was that before the streets, I'd led 40 operators through the most hostile terrain on earth. And I'd learned long ago that the most dangerous men are the ones you never see coming. I first noticed the back door of the gym about a week after I arrived under the overpass. It was early morning, the Texas sun already cooking the asphalt. I was sitting on an overturned milk crate, trying to make a cup of cold water last, when the door swung open and a man in a tight rash guard stepped out. He was mid-20s, built like a statue, tribal tattoos crawling up his neck. He took one look at me, sneered, and kicked the cardboard box I used as a table. Find another alley, bum. This is a place of business, not a flophouse. That was Chad Higgins, owner of Higgins Elite Mixed Martial Arts, and that was the beginning of a daily ritual of humiliation that would have broken most men. But I wasn't most men. For 22 years, I'd been a Navy SEAL. I'd led a team of 40 operators through the most brutal house-to-house fighting in Kandahar. I'd planned missions where a single wrong step meant my men came home in flag-draped boxes. I'd been shot, blown up, and left for dead more times than I cared to count. After my last deployment, the world I returned to didn't make sense. The VA gave me pills that turned me into a ghost. I lost my wife. I lost my house. I lost the ability to sleep without seeing the faces of men I couldn't save. Eventually, I just walked away from it all and drifted south until I ran out of road. The underside of the South Street overpass wasn't much, but it was quiet, and I'd stopped wanting things I couldn't have. I had a sleeping bag, a crate, and a routine that kept me invisible. Then, Chad Higgins decided I was entertainment. Every morning, he'd step out that door. Some days, he'd pour his protein shake onto my blanket. Other days, he'd flick cigarette butts at me while stretching. His students would gather around, laughing, recording on their phones. "What's the matter, old man? Too lazy to fight for a roof?" He'd kick my cup of loose change clattering into the gutter and do a little bow like he just won a championship. I never said a word. After Kandahar, a 20-something with a jiu-jitsu belt wasn't worth the breath it would take to explain what real combat felt like. But here's the thing about staying silent. Predators mistake it for weakness. They push harder because they think there's no cost. I could see it in Chad's eyes every time he looked at me. He needed someone beneath him to feel tall. And I was the only person in his kingdom who wouldn't fight back. Or so he thought. The night it all changed was a Tuesday in late September. The temperature had finally dropped, but the alley was still rank with dumpster rot and stale sweat. I was sitting on my crate, writing in a small notebook, my one remaining habit from the world I'd left. The gym's back door banged open. Chad stepped out, but this time he wasn't alone. He had 3 students with him, all holding their phones, a cloud of pre-workout energy buzzing around them. "There he is," Chad announced, his voice thick with performative swagger. "The neighborhood's finest. Hey, homeless, I've got a proposition for you." He walked right up to me. Close enough that I could smell the cologne and aggression rolling off him. "We're making content tonight. You want to earn $20? Stand up and spar with me. I'll go easy on you." "Maybe, probably not." His students laughed. I closed my notebook. Not interested. Chad's grin widened. He reached down and shoved my shoulder hard, sending me off my crate into a puddle of cold, filthy water. Mud splattered across my jacket, my face, my hands. "I didn't ask if you were interested," he said. "I'm giving you a chance to prove you're not a waste of oxygen. Get up and fight, old man." I stood slowly. The cold water dripped from my beard. I could feel the old machinery clicking on inside me, the part of my brain that had been asleep for 3 months. I gave him one warning. Walk away. You don't want this. Chad laughed and raised his fists, bouncing on his toes. Oh, I definitely want this. He threw a looping right hand. And in that instant, I stopped being Marcus Webb, the homeless man nobody saw, and became the man who had once led 40 operators through hell. What happened next took less than 3 seconds and was captured from 4 different angles. Chad's looping right hand came in wide and slow, all ego and no economy. To someone who'd survived close-quarters combat in the mud-brick alleys of Kandahar, it was like watching a child throw a tantrum in slow motion. I didn't block it. I stepped forward into the inside, slipping the arc of his fist so his forearm landed harmlessly against my shoulder. Before his brain registered he'd missed, my lead hand had already trapped his extended arm at the elbow. My hips sank, my weight dropped, and I pivoted him like a broken gate. He never saw the ground coming. One moment he was swinging at a homeless man, the next he was face down in a cold, filthy puddle, my right knee pinning his spine and his arm locked so tight behind his back that a single millimeter more pressure would snap his elbow in the wrong direction. The silence that followed was absolute. The 3 students holding their phones froze mid-frame, their faces washed pale by the glow of their screens. Chad gasped, mouth filling with ditch water, bubbles forming around his lips. He tried to buck, but it was like trying to move a mountain. My knee stayed planted, my grip iron. I leaned down until my mouth was inches from his ear, my voice low enough that only he and the phones would capture it. You've been stepping over me for 3 months, kicking my change, dumping your shake on my bed. You thought I was nothing because I wasn't fighting back. What you never bothered to learn, Chad, is that I stopped fighting back because I'd already done more fighting than you'll ever know. I led 40 Navy SEALs through the worst war zones on this planet. I've killed men with my bare hands to protect my team. The only reason your gym even exists on American soil is because men like me bled for it. And you're a second-degree belt with a strip mall dojo and an ego problem. You're not a warrior. You're a bully who's never faced a real threat. Until tonight. I released the arm lock and stood, leaving him gasping in the puddle like a landed fish. The students didn't move, didn't speak. One of the phones was still recording, its red light blinking in the darkness. I looked directly into the lens. Every homeless person you pass has a story you're too lazy to learn. Some of those stories involve sacrifices you can't imagine. Remember that. I walked back to my crate, picked up my notebook, and disappeared into the shadows under the overpass. I didn't look back. By sunrise the next morning, the video had been uploaded. By noon, it had cracked 100,000 views. By evening, it was everywhere. Local news, military blogs, martial arts forums. The title that stuck was "Homeless Man Destroys Arrogant Black Belt in Seconds." But the real story wasn't the takedown. It was the words I'd whispered over Chad's wet, trembling body. Someone had amplified the audio. Someone had captioned it. Suddenly, the internet wanted to know everything about the homeless man who'd claimed to lead a SEAL team. It didn't take long. By Wednesday morning, a retired Master Chief named Dan Riordan saw the video while drinking coffee at a VA facility in Virginia Beach. His hands started shaking. He'd served under me in Helmand Province in 2010. I was Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, the officer who'd pulled him out of a burning Humvee while taking shrapnel to the ribs. He hadn't heard my name in years, had assumed, like many, that I was dead. He posted a comment under the video, "That's not just any homeless man. That's Marcus Webb." Silver Star. Bronze Star with valor. 4 combat deployments. The finest officer I ever served under. How did we let this happen? That comment went viral too. Within 48 hours, the narrative flipped. People stopped asking, "Is he lying?" and started asking, "How did a decorated war hero end up sleeping under an overpass?" The VA was scrambling. Veteran advocacy groups were issuing statements. And Chad Higgins? His gym's Yelp page became a war zone of one-star reviews. Within a week, 70% of his students had canceled their memberships. The local news parked outside his strip mall, shoving microphones in his face. His sponsors, a supplement company and a local car dealership, pulled their contracts. The tribal tattoos that once made him look dangerous now just made him look terrified. But the story didn't end with Chad's humiliation. Because while the world was busy turning me into a viral headline, the man who'd spent 3 months treating me like garbage was quietly assembling a different kind of weapon. A legal one. He hired a high-priced attorney who specialized in defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They argued that takedown was an unprovoked assault, that I'd instigated the confrontation, that the video was edited to make Chad look bad. They started floating the phrase "stolen valor" to muddy the waters. The lawyer sent a demand letter to the news stations, threatening to sue anyone who republished the footage without Chad's consent. Then they did something far worse. They tracked down my ex-wife. They started asking questions about my discharge, about my mental state, about the night I walked out and never came back. I'd been invisible for 3 months. Now I was the center of a storm I never asked for. And the man I'd let walk away with only a bruised ego was determined to make sure I lost whatever shred of dignity I had left. But what Chad and his lawyers didn't understand, what no one understood, was that the worst thing you could do to a man who'd already lost everything wasn't threaten his reputation. It was threaten the few people he still cared about. And when I found out they'd contacted my son, the boy I'd walked away from to protect him from the wreckage of my own mind, the vault I'd kept locked since Fallujah didn't just crack open. It shattered. I found out they'd contacted my son in the worst way possible. Not through a lawyer's letter, not through a process server. I learned it from a 16-year-old boy standing at the edge of my cardboard shelter at 3 a.m, shaking. His mother's car idling in the alley behind him. He'd disobeyed her direct order. He'd stolen her keys. He'd typed my old name into a GPS and followed a viral video's location tags down to a damp concrete overpass in Austin, Texas. He was tall and thin, wearing a hoodie I'd mailed him 2 Christmases ago, and his eyes were the same shade of gray as mine. His name was Caleb. I hadn't seen him in 4 years. He didn't speak at first. He just stood there, hands jammed in his pockets, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his cheeks. I rose from my crate. I stank. I hadn't shaved in weeks. My left eye was still swollen from a tussle with a drunk a few nights prior. I was not the father he remembered. But he didn't run. He took a step forward, then another. Then he collapsed into my chest and sobbed like he was still the 12-year-old I'd left behind. I held him, and for the first time since Fallujah, I prayed, not to God, to whatever was left of my own broken soul, begging it not to fail this boy again. Once he calmed, the story spilled out. A private investigator hired by Chad's legal team had shown up at his school 3 days earlier. He'd pulled Caleb out of 5th period, flashed photos of me, homeless, dirty, the takedown video, and asked questions designed to build a narrative. Was I violent when I lived at home? Did I ever hit his mother? Did I own weapons? They were assembling a case that the homeless man who attacked their client was a ticking time bomb with a history of domestic instability. They offered Caleb's mother, my ex-wife Elaine, a settlement to sign an affidavit detailing my PTSD episodes, my nightmares. The night I woke up screaming and put my fist through the drywall. She'd refused. She hated me, yes. But even she wouldn't sell me out for Chad Higgins's money. So they threatened her instead. Told her they'd subpoena Caleb, put him on a stand, force him to relive his father's unraveling in open court. That's when Caleb ran. I felt something cold and clinical click into place inside my chest. The vault was gone now. In its place was a focused, surgical clarity I hadn't felt since planning a night raid in Kandahar. I had made mistakes, colossal, unforgivable ones. I had walked out on my family because I believed my brokenness would poison them. I'd accepted the streets as my penance. But I would not let a strip mall bully and his ambulance chaser drag my son through the mud to save their failing reputation. They wanted to know if I was dangerous. They were about to find out. I called Elaine from Caleb's phone. She answered on the first ring. The conversation was 37 seconds long, and for the first time in half a decade, we weren't fighting. I told her I'd handle it. I told her to trust me. She said, Marcus, your son hasn't stopped talking about you since the day you left. Don't make him lose you twice. Then she hung up. I gave Caleb a hug, promised him I'd see him soon, and sent him back to the car. The moment the taillights vanished, I started walking toward a 24-hour diner I knew had a payphone. I had calls to make. The first call was to Dan Riordan, the Master Chief who'd posted the comment that identified me. He answered before the first ring ended, like he'd been waiting. Sir, we've been trying to find you. The whole community is fired up. There's a legal fund. There's a place to stay. Just tell me where you are. I told him the diner. He was there in 40 minutes wearing a navy ball cap and carrying a duffel bag. Inside the bag were fresh clothes, a burner phone, and a file from a pro bono lawyer at a veterans advocacy group who'd already done a full workup on Chad Higgins. The man had a history: 2 sealed juvenile assault charges. A former student who'd settled out of court after a training accident left him with a fractured orbital bone. And most critically, the gym's liability waiver, the one Chad never had me sign the night he attacked me. Without a signed waiver, his entire self-defense argument was tissue paper. But here's what I didn't know that night. Chad knew we had the waiver problem. And he was willing to burn the entire forest to escape it. The next morning, I was served with an emergency protective order issued by a judge Chad's lawyer had golfed with for a decade. The order barred me from coming within 500 yards of Higgins Elite Emma, the South Street overpass, and, this was the knife twist, any location where Caleb Webb was known to reside or attend school. They'd argued to the court that my erratic and violent behavior posed an immediate threat to the minor child I'd abandoned years ago. It was a masterstroke of legal poison. They couldn't win the assault case, so they flipped the board. Now, any attempt I made to see my own son could land me in jail. And with a protective order on my public record, every news outlet that had painted me as a hero would be forced to add 4 words to every headline: accused domestic instability, mental health questions, protective order issued. I sat in the VA-funded motel room Dan had set up, staring at the document. It was 11 in the morning. The protective order had been executed at dawn, just as news trucks were setting up outside Chad's gym for a segment on the hero homeless veteran. By noon, the anchors had new scripts. By evening, the comment sections were dividing. Maybe he is crazy. My cousin was a SEAL, and they're all wound tight. He abandoned his kid, now he's stalking him? The court of public opinion was turning. But Dan didn't flinch. He handed me the burner phone. Make the call, sir. The lawyer's waiting. And there's something else you need to see. He pulled up a video on his tablet. It was a new upload from Chad's personal account, posted an hour earlier. In it, Chad sat in his office, wearing a sling on his arm that he absolutely did not have after our confrontation. His voice was soft, measured, victim-calibrated. I made mistakes. I was arrogant. I shouldn't have engaged with the homeless gentleman outside my gym. But what happened was an unprovoked assault by a man with severe psychological trauma. I've learned he has a history of violence at home. I'm cooperating with authorities to ensure he gets the help he needs. As for my gym, we are implementing new community outreach programs. Please respect my students' privacy during this time. It was a masterclass in narrative theft. He'd taken my pain, my service, my sacrifice, and twisted them into the very weapons he'd used to destroy me. And he'd wrapped it all in a sling made for the camera. I dialed the lawyer. Her name was Priya Desai, and she'd spent 6 years in the JAG Corps before taking on veteran cases pro bono. Her voice was calm and sharp as a scalpel. They're going to argue you're a danger to yourself and others. They'll use your VA records, your discharge psych eval, everything. But here's what they don't have: a single police report, a single domestic complaint, a single shred of evidence that you were ever anything but a father who removed himself from his family because he believed it would protect them. They also don't have a signed waiver for the night of the fight. And we have 4 cell phone videos of Chad Higgins assaulting you first. We're counterfiling tomorrow morning. Assault, battery, defamation per se, and tortious interference with familial relations. We're also filing an emergency motion to vacate the protective order on the grounds that it was obtained through fraudulent misrepresentation. I asked her what the catch was. She paused. The catch is that to vacate the order, you'll need to testify. In open court, about your PTSD, about the night you left your family, about everything you've been running from for 4 years. The world will hear it. Caleb will hear it. Are you ready for that? I looked at the cracked ceiling of the motel room. I thought about the boy who'd driven 3 hours to find his homeless father in the dark. I thought about the man who'd kicked my cup of change for 3 months and was now wearing a fake sling on YouTube. Then I thought about the 40 operators I'd led through hell and the promise I'd made to each of them that we fight for the man next to us, no matter the cost. I'm ready, I said. But that night, as I lay in the dark preparing my mind for the battle ahead, the burner phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was 2 sentences long. Your son is a sweet kid. It would be a shame if something happened to him on his way to school. Below it, a photo of Caleb walking out of his front door that very morning, time-stamped and clear. Chad Higgins wasn't trying to win a court case anymore. He was threatening my child. And that changed everything. I stared at the photo for a long time. The burner phone felt cold in my hand. Caleb was walking out his front door, backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds in, completely unaware he was being watched. The message beneath it was clear. Back off, or your son pays the price. Chad Higgins had graduated from bully to something far more dangerous. He'd decided that if he was going down, he'd take the people I loved with him. But he made one fatal miscalculation. He'd sent that threat electronically, across state lines, using a phone that, within 6 hours, FBI cybercrime analysts would trace directly to a prepaid account purchased by Chad's personal assistant at a gas station 2 blocks from the gym. The assistant, a terrified 22-year-old named Jared, who'd once held the camera while Chad kicked my cup of change, flipped in under 10 minutes of questioning. He told the FBI everything. The sling was fake, the protective order was a setup orchestrated over golf course bourbon, and Chad had personally ordered him to send the threat to scare the crazy old man back into his hole. Federal charges don't care about your jiu-jitsu belt. By the time the sun came up, Chad Higgins was in handcuffs, led out of his gym in front of the very news crews he'd been manipulating. The fake sling slipped off his arm as they pushed him into the cruiser, and a photographer caught it. A single frame of a perfectly healthy arm exposed to the world. That photo ran on the front page of the Austin American-Statesman the next morning with a headline that read, "Broken Arm or Broken Ethics? MMA instructor's case collapses." The protective order was vacated by noon the same day. The judge who'd issued it, a man named Calloway, recused himself after Priya Desai's motion pointed out that he'd attended a charity golf tournament with Chad's attorney less than a month before. The new judge, a no-nonsense woman named Angela Reyes, didn't just dissolve the order, she issued a scathing bench ruling that questioned whether the original filing constituted an abuse of process. She also ordered Chad to pay my legal fees. It wasn't the knockout punch it sounded like. Veteran advocacy groups had already covered everything, but the symbolic weight was enormous. The court officially had called his bluff. The criminal case against him moved fast. Interstate threats, witness tampering, filing a false police report, and a stack of lesser charges that his high-priced attorney couldn't dodge because the evidence was digital, time-stamped, and undeniable. He took a plea deal, 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of probation. The gym was sold at auction. The new owner, a quiet woman named Rosa Martinez, converted it into a community center offering free self-defense classes for domestic violence survivors. I like that. Something good rising from the ashes. As for me, the legal victory was only half the battle. The other half was sitting in a courtroom gallery during my own testimony, watching his father, clean-shaven now, wearing a borrowed suit, tell the world about the worst night of his life. I told him about the Eid in Ramadi that killed 2 men I trained myself. I told him about the nights I'd woken up screaming, convinced I was still in the sand. I told him why I'd walked away from the woman I still loved and the son I couldn't bear to disappoint any further. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I've done things that no human should have to do. But when I finished, Caleb stood up from the gallery. He didn't wait for permission. He walked straight to the witness stand and hugged me in front of God, the judge, and a courtroom full of strangers. The bailiff didn't stop him. The judge didn't stop him. Elaine was crying in the back row, and I saw something I hadn't seen in 4 years. She wasn't looking at me with anger anymore. She was looking at me the way she used to, back when I was still the man who came home. That night, for the first time in 3 months, I didn't sleep under an overpass. I slept on a pull-out couch in a modest apartment my son called home, listening to the sound of his breathing through a thin wall. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't a happily ever after. But it was a beginning. And here's the detail that still catches me off guard. A few weeks after everything settled, a package arrived at the apartment. Inside was a letter from a Marine named Thomas Keller, who'd been one of Chad's students 3 years earlier. He'd left the gym after a training accident left him with 3 broken ribs and a concussion. He'd stayed silent because Chad threatened to sue him if he spoke out. But now, seeing me stand up, he'd found the courage to come forward. Enclosed with his letter were medical records, photos of his injuries, and a sworn affidavit detailing what Chad had done to him. It turned out I wasn't the first person Chad had tried to destroy. I was just the first one who'd refused to stay broken. Today, I work with the VA, helping veterans navigate the same dark waters I nearly drowned in. I see Caleb every weekend. Elaine and I are taking things slow, but we're talking, really talking, for the first time in years. The overpass is still there. Sometimes I drive past it, not to remember the pain, but to remind myself that even when you think your story is over, there's always another page waiting to be written. The bully who kicked my change into the gutter thought he was teaching me a lesson about power. Instead, he taught an entire city what real strength looks like. It's not about how hard you can hit. It's about what you're willing to fight for when everything you love is on the line. What an incredible reminder that the people we walk past every day carry entire worlds we know nothing about. The man on the corner with the cardboard sign might have once held a rifle in defense of this country. The woman pushing a shopping cart might have once been a nurse who saved a dozen lives before her own unraveled. Homelessness isn't a character flaw. It's often the scar tissue of sacrifices we'll never fully understand. Chad Higgins learned that lesson in the mud behind his own gym, but the real question is whether the rest of us need to learn it too. How many times have you glanced away from someone asking for help, assuming their story wasn't worth your time? How many Marcus Webbs are sleeping under overpasses tonight, their skills and stories buried under layers of suffering we refuse to see? The truth is, dignity doesn't vanish when a person loses their address. And sometimes, the most dangerous man in the room isn't the one with the loudest mouth or the shiniest belt. It's the one who's already lost everything and has nothing left to fear. If this story struck a chord with you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Have you ever witnessed someone's arrogance backfire in a way that changed your perspective? Have you ever been underestimated and proved everyone wrong? Share your experiences, because these conversations matter more than you know. And if you believe that every veteran deserves more than a cardboard box under a bridge, consider supporting organizations that actually make a difference. The link is in the description. If you love this story of a bully finally getting what he deserved, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more incredible, real-life drama. You never know what kind of hero you might be walking past tomorrow.